Washington. We will have complete coverage of the southeast Texas flooding from Hurricane Harvey in just a moment. But first tonight, we begin with another missile launch from North Korea. South Korea's news agency now says the North has fired an unidentified type of ballistic missile today, and there are now multiple reports that the missile may have flown over Japan.
Seoul, and also a chorus of condemnation has been streaming in from across the world, as you'd imagine, following North Korea's latest missile provocation. Tokyo, in particular, is incensed after it was prompted to warn its local residents to take shelter as the North Korean missile flew over its territory. It's the second time the North has fired a missile over Japan, the last time in 1998, when another rocket violated Japanese airspace before falling into the ocean, like this morning's one did as well. Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga says this launch was a serious and unprecedented threat to the country and promised to take firm measures without really elaborating on what they may be. Britain's Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson also slammed the regime. In a statement posted on Twitter, as you can see there, he said he was outraged by North Korea's reckless provocations. With North Korea's launch of yet another ballistic missile. This wasn't any old launch, though. The missile flew directly over Japan, a significant escalation showing North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's defiance of President Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Trump had said Kim was starting to respect the U.S., but he may have to rethink that assessment following what happened this morning. Let's get more information from our reporter at Seoul's Defense Ministry, Kim Hyun-bin. So, Hyun-bin, this is a fluid situation, and we are still awaiting reactions from the key players in the region. But what's the latest you're hearing?
Well, as you mentioned, Mark, North Korea fired what is believed to be an intermediate ballistic missile over Japan just over 4 hours ago. And South Korea Joint Chiefs of Staff says the missile was fired from Sunan near Pyongyang at 5:57 a.m. South Korea time. The JCS says the missile flew directly over the northern Japanese island of Hokkaido and fell into the North Pacific Ocean. The Pentagon also confirmed the missile that it flew over Japan's territory, adding that it's still assessing the launch. The missile flew some 2,700 kilometers, reaching an altitude of 550 kilometers. And experts say the North probably fired the missile to demonstrate that it's capable of targeting the U.S. territory of Guam at any given moment. The distance between Pyongyang and Guam is some 3,000 kilometers away. At the height of U.S.-North Korea tensions earlier this month, North Korea threatened to launch 4 intermediate ballistic missiles into waters near Guam to show it's capable of targeting U.S. military bases on the island. Now, Japan, which sounded sirens in certain regions upon news of the launch, is deeply concerned by the escalation, but made no effort to shoot down the missile. Now, Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga described it as an unprecedented grave threat, and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe vowed to protect the Japanese public in the wake of this provocation. Now, this comes after the North launched 3 short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea over the weekend. Now, we are expected to be briefed by military officials here shortly, so hopefully I'll have more updates for you during the next newscast at noon, Korea time. Back to you.
We are waking up to a breaking news this morning. Just over an hour ago, North Korea has fired an as of yet unidentified projectile in an eastwardly direction and actually over Japan. We have our Yoo Junhee on the line to give us more details. Junhee, what do we have so far?
Simon, according to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, the projectile was fired at 5:57 a.m. South Korea time from the district of Sunan, which is on the outskirts of Pyongyang. Now, NHK News is reporting that the rocket flew over Japan's northern island of Hokkaido and out towards the Pacific Ocean. NHK also reports that the projectile fell in water some 1,200 kilometers east of Hokkaido. The Japanese government even told its people at one point on the eastern coast to take refuge. Now, in a nationally televised remark, Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga says Tokyo is working in close coordination with the U.S. and South Korea concerning the provocation, which he called a new and serious development. And South Korea's military says it's currently working with its U.S. counterparts to analyze the launch and determine what type of missile it was. This also comes amid reports from South Korea's National Intelligence Service that Pyongyang has completed preparations to conduct another nuclear test at its Punggye test site. Now, following these developments, South Korea's Presidential Office of Cheongwade has convened an emergency meeting of the National Security Council, which has just gotten underway. We'll have more details later for you as they come in. Back to you, Simon.
Thank you, Junhee, and we will have more on the details and the outcome of the NSC meeting in our later newscast.
North Korea firing a ballistic missile that passed over northern Japan early Tuesday morning, according to local media reports. South Korean outlet Yonhap reporting the missile came from near Pyongyang, the seat of Kim Jong-un's government, while Japan's NHK said it passed over northern Japan just after 6 a.m. local time. The Japanese military did not attempt to shoot down the missile, but NHK reporting the missile broke into 3 pieces and fell into the ocean off Hokkaido, the northernmost of Japan's 5 main islands.
The Pentagon is still assessing the trajectory of this latest missile fired from North Korea. As you mentioned, Yonhap, South Korea's news agency, first reported within the last hour that the missile was fired somewhere close to Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. It flew toward Japan. There are reports from the ground in Japan that it actually flew over northern Japan. The Missile Defense Agency here at the Pentagon put out a report suggesting that the missile had in fact flown over Japan. This is the 18th missile fired by North Korea since the start of the year and comes just days after President Trump warned North Korea not to do more.
It's the most provocative action from Pyongyang since Kim appeared to back down from a plan to send rockets toward the U.S. Pacific island of Guam. At the time, President Donald Trump threatened fire and fury if North Korea went through with the launch.
I'm going to come to you on this. You've worked for 2 presidents. North Korea is not a new issue. I think we can all agree no one has effectively figured out how to handle it based off of what you've seen from your days in both White Houses, what you've observed so far for the Trump administration. What is your general sense and feeling around this possible development?
Well, if these reports are confirmed, this is a huge deal. I mean, that kind of intermediate range missile flying over Japan's airspace is, I mean, that's, I don't like to over-dramatize and claim that that's tantamount to an act of war, but, I mean, depending on the circumstances when we get the details, but it's a big deal no matter how you slice and dice it. Japan's a major ally to the United States, though we're not, you know, they're not wed to us through a NATO treaty, and we're not obligated to necessarily come to their defense in this instance. That's a question that will immediately be on the president's plate.
North Korea fires another ballistic missile that directly crosses Japan. Seoul convenes an emergency National Security Council meeting. The South Korean military says a missile flew 2,700 kilometers and came down in waters 1,200 kilometers east of Japan's Hokkaido. The Japanese government told its people to take cover upon news of the missile launch, saying it'll make the utmost efforts to firmly protect its people. President Moon orders the military to further enhance its defense readiness, calling enough capabilities to counter Pyongyang's asymmetrical threats. The Pentagon says North Korea's launch of 3 short-range ballistic missiles over the weekend was a threat, even if they didn't directly endanger the U.S. Seoul issues a special warning on transactions with 20 Chinese, North Korean, and other foreign entities put on the U.S. sanctions list for financially aiding the regime.
Julian, how does this, if you're the White House, how does this change their calculus in dealing with North Korea if the reports are true?
I don't know that it will immediately change the president's calculus, but it definitely, it ups the stakes. It doesn't mean that we'd be prepared to, you know, to launch a ground war against North Korea or, you know, sort of escalate the nuclear threat or anything like that. But it's definitely something that will infuriate the president, and rightly so. And it's something that will, I think, cause the United States to really push China a lot harder than they even have been, which has sort of been to the max lately in terms of hedging against North Korea.
And a lot of people have been describing this dynamic between President Trump and really previous U.S. presidents as well and Kim Jong-un in that regime as kind of a game of chicken is something that I've heard floated. But we know this is not a game, right? We know that these are potentially millions of lives at stake, as you're saying. And if this development is even anywhere near true, those stakes just got higher today.
You're absolutely right. It's not a game. It's not a game of chicken. There are real consequences here, millions of lives when you calculate out North and South Korea, Japan, whoever else is in arm's length of the missile or a nuclear missile. But the problem here is that there's no good alternative. So people have been very quick to criticize whoever the president is on this issue. We're not doing enough. We're not being forceful enough. But there are no easy options, and there is nothing that is guaranteed to get us from 0 to 10 on this issue.